Tēnā koutou TENZ, me ngā kaiako hangarau katoa. Kia ora folks. Nonga taha te maunga, waikato te awa, no Rotorua ahau, kei te noho ahau I whanganui a Tara a Nainei, ko Warwick Fairhall, toka matua, ko Heather Mitchell, toka mama, ko Shane Fairhall, toka ingoa. Kia ora folks, my name is Shane Fairhall. I'm a lead secondary advisor at the Ministry of Education, and this year it's been my great pleasure and privilege to be working with the Digital Technologies Subject Expert Group, and more recently the DVC Subject Expert Group, as we develop content as part of the review of achievement standards. Last year I was in the classroom. Last year I was teaching digital technologies and DVC at Onslow College in Wellington, and was also leading the technology faculty at Onslow College.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Morvins te maunga, ko Seven te awa, no Worcester o, ko Stephanie O'Sullivan tōku ingoa. And I too joined the ministry earlier this year as a lead secondary advisor. I've been working with the materials and processing SEG. I've come out of the classroom after almost 30 years living and breathing technology education, both in the UK and in New Zealand. And I feel really privileged to be part of the review of the achievement standards and to work with such an amazing team of people here at the ministry. It's an amazing process to be part of.
Steph and I started at the ministry on the same day back in January. And I think what's unusual and great about our team is that we're comprised almost entirely of teachers, so I think that's relatively rare in the ministry. We're lucky to have this kind of group of people working together with subject expert groups who have that classroom experience, and who can bring that to this project. Our process today, like we had hoped to be with you in person, unfortunately we can't. So our process today is to go through our presentation online, recorded through video. I think it's going to be a bit awkward. It's certainly not what I was intending to be doing. Please do forgive us as we stumble around and tell each other to go back 2 slides or whatever it is. As we fumble and make mistakes, I'm sure it will work. I hope you find it useful. So what we're going to do is use a PowerPoint presentation just to talk to as we go through this today. So let me bring that up just now. We hope as well that to keep the video relatively short. So what I'd like to do first is to just provide a quick overview of the change program. And I think to do that, we'll start with the 7 key changes. I don't really want to go into details around the number of standards or credit values or some of the finer details around the change program, because I think that's been covered extensively already through the teacher only days and on the NCEA.education website. But it would be useful to look back at those 7 key changes that kind of inform what we're doing here. So those changes are, as you can see on the screen, to make NCEA more accessible. Number 2 is mana orite, mō te mātauranga Māori, or equality or equity of Māori knowledge. 3 is having fewer larger standards. 4 is strengthening literacy and numeracy requirements. Simplifying NCEA structure. Showing clearer pathways to further education and employment. And then finally, keeping NCEA Level 1 as an optional qualification. And I think these are the key changes that have informed our process and inform the scope that the SEGs have been working with. So, SEGs, subject expert groups. During 2021, the subject expert groups have been working and developing content for each subject. And I thought it might be useful just to give you a picture of what a SEG or a subject expert group looks like. So you can see on the screen the kind of makeup here. A SEG has a ministry facilitator and a writer, but it's made up mostly of practicing teachers. And these teachers will come from a range of schools or kura of different deciles in the public sector, in public schools or integrated schools, in different communities, different deciles in different locations. We'll have representative from industry or tertiary, and there'll be representatives who hold critical perspectives about Ākonga Māori or Pacific learners, and also NZQA representatives. So we've got everyone in the room here. And this is the process that the subject expert groups have gone through as they've been developing products. So initially, the subject expert groups started with the big ideas of each subject, and then for each subject determined what the significant learning in that subject was. So this is the learning that's not to be left to chance. Based on that, they grouped that kind of significant learning together and developed achievement standard titles. And this was phase 1 of our project for level 1. Once it was complete, our materials were published, and we went out for public consultation and collected feedback from through a survey from public, through focus groups, and from a number of other interest groups as well. Then we took that feedback in and refined our products, refined our learning matrices, our achievement standard titles, and our big ideas. And then during phase 2, we actually went and developed the achievement standards. So looking at all the criteria and step-ups, and all the support material that goes along with the achievement standards. Again, at the end of phase 2, we went out for public consultation, and this was the consultation window, I think, that closed in August. And after we'd had that feedback collected from public, we took that in and refined the products again, and are now in the process of working with NZQA to make sure that those standards and those other products are ready for pilot. So Steph, I think you're going to talk about feedback.
Yeah, so I want to say thank you for your feedback. It is really valuable and it does inform the development process. And since working for the ministry, I've really come to realise how important and essential feedback is. It really is reviewed, collated and considered. It does matter that you provide this feedback, and the time that you take to do this is much appreciated, as we understand there are many pulls on your time. However, we would still like some more. It's really helpful to hear what you do like, as well as what you feel could be improved. Applying that plus minus interesting process to your responses will give us real understandings of your thinking and provide us with some direction. Okay, next slide. Cool, thanks. So I'd like to share some examples of where your feedback has directly informed our work. So we heard that for 1.3 materials and processing technology, it was too big and broad and pitched above the level of level 1 students. This was pulled back from using sustainability in general to inform conceptual design development to using sustainable practices to inform development, so narrowing the scope and reducing workload. For 1.2 materials and processing technology, we heard that diverse materials is an ambiguous term, too broad, and could result in resourcing and safety issues. So we pulled back this to being different materials to reduce the breadth that could be considered in the development of an outcome. And during phase 1 development of 1.3 for digital technology, which was focused on the impact of a digital tool on society, through feedback, we heard that this may have been too big for level 1, and there was a desire to change this, and we subsequently altered this to look at interface usability.
I do want to reiterate the usefulness of that feedback, and really encourage people to submit feedback through feedback processes. In our most recent round of feedback on our products, I think some subjects had fewer than 20 pieces of feedback from the country, so it's really important that you get that feedback in. One area where feedback was plentiful was on the level 2 and 3 subject lists. So I'll talk about those now, and I want to talk about the guiding principles around the establishment of the subjects. And that was that level 1 should be broad and foundational, with opportunities for further specialization at levels 2 and 3. So what you can see on the screen here is where we arrived based on input from expert groups and from your public feedback. The volume of feedback here, like I said before, was quite large, and it was actually really mixed, split relatively evenly between those in favour of fewer or more subjects at levels 2 and 3. So just talking through the subjects here, design and visual communication remains essentially unchanged from level 1 going into levels 2 and 3. Digital technologies splits into two subjects, one aligned with the computational thinking for digital technologies area of the curriculum, and one aligned with the designing and developing digital outcomes area of the technology curriculum. Materials and processing technology at level 1 splits into more specialized subjects at level 2, with materials technology sitting alone, and a new subject, processing and system technologies, drawing together learning from across areas of the technology curriculum, with a focus on the roles of processing and systems of interconnected components and their application in technologies. Sorry, I had to read that one off the paper. You'll also see in the Timarotonga or Aotearoa space, at level 1 we have Hangaro, that carries across to level 2, and also at level 2, Hangaro Matehiko, which is on a slightly different development timeline to the other subjects there. I think as well, it's important to note here that the subjects are not themselves aligned with traditional domains, for instance, digital media or textiles, but that we imagine that in many cases, schools will create courses that may apply the learning in these subjects to a particular domain to suit the needs of their learners or their communities. So, for example, you might see a fashion and textiles course that covers the significant learning in materials technology and is assessed using materials technology standards. So Steph, do you want to give us an update on mini pilot?
Yeah, so what's currently happening with mini pilots? So NCEA and the Ministry are working closely together to support the mini pilot. The 4 level 1 subjects for English, visual arts, science and religious studies, these achievement standards and assessment materials are being piloted throughout 2021. Students will be eligible for credits for these new standards, and selected mini pilot schools will develop teaching and learning programs. NCEA will capture a small number of annotated assessment exemplars that will be published on ncea.education. The mini pilot will support the design of the full-scale pilot of all level 1 subjects. Next screen. So what piloteers are saying. Current piloteers have been reflecting on their involvement with this process, and that's largely been very positive experience for them, their students, and for the schools involved. There have been positive changes to practice with a greater focus on learning over assessment and the inclusion of Mātauranga Māori. Okay, next slide. So for all the other subjects that are being developed for level 1, we've currently got them to the point where the products need to be tested individually for fitness, for purpose and functionality. So we need to know whether they provide the expected grades and the expected evidence. Piloting enables us to identify what works well, where improvements are needed, and if any revisions need to be made prior to going countrywide. Schools are being selected to cover a wide range of contexts and regions. They will know shortly if they have been selected. One-day workshops will be arranged to begin planning well before piloting commences. NCEA and the Ministry will work together to support schools during the piloting process. It will enable the establishment and testing of new assessment practices such as mid-year externals. As part of the process, full annotated exemplars for both internal and external standards will be developed to exemplify to the sector justification of grading and the amount of work that would meet the requirements of the standard. They will also exemplify a range of ways that students could present their evidence for assessment. Exemplars will have indicative comments showing where students have explicitly shown an understanding of Mātauranga Māori and Te Ao Māori in their responses to guide teachers on what to look for. Teachers will be provided with professional development as they embark on the piloting journey, as well as support from the Ministry of Education and NCEA and each other as they travel together. Schools involved in piloting will develop detailed teaching and learning programs that can be contextualized for your own setting. These will be designed to show clearly how Mātauranga Māori can and should be built into programs in schools.
Awesome.
Cool, thanks.
Steph, I'm going to pick up on a few of those points about the products that we're developing, but also I think maybe today as we're recording this video, schools are being informed about whether or not they have made it into the pilot. So hopefully by the time you view this, that information should be public. So a question that I hear quite often is, how will schools be supported to implement the changes? And Steph's actually covered off quite a lot of that through talking about pilots, because that's one of the big ways that we will offer implementation support. Through those exemplars, those annotated exemplars of student work, and through those detailed teaching and learning programs that are developed as part of the pilot process. And so that will be a key support. Of course, there's also the Accord teacher-only days, which continue to focus on the review of achievement standards and the NCEA change program, and those are ongoing. But also I wanted to talk about, just briefly, professional development funding that's made available through something that the ministry calls networks of expertise. So networks of expertise is a model of funding that links funding to subject associations and other groups who are best placed to deliver it to particular communities. And the network of expertise funding at the moment is focused on the review of achievement standards and the NCEA change program. So the reason that we run professional development through those subject associations is that we think that those associations, or those groups, are best placed to speak to obviously their members and the teachers in the schools, and to understand the actual professional development needs of those groups. I think for technology there are 4, 5, maybe 6 groups that have got NEX, or network of expertise funding, who will be able to provide support to technology teachers through this process. So yeah, so that's kind of broadly the implementation support. I think we've got one more thing to talk about, don't we?
Yeah, so the external assessment formats for materials and processing technology. So the review of the achievement standards is the perfect opportunity to develop new and innovative ways in which to assess students' ability to meet the standard based on the New Zealand curriculum at the appropriate level. We're still working through external assessment specifications with NCEA. We are looking at using common assessment activities for the 2 external standards. We do need to be mindful that the assessment needs to be authentic, reliable, consistent and credible across all teaching and learning environments, and a common assessment activity is going to enable this. We would like to reassure teachers that the assessment will not be an exam and will not resemble an exam. The assessment will not be a report and will not resemble a report. Having a common assessment activity as the mode of assessment is intended to address workload issues for both students and teachers. The mode of assessment should avoid those lengthy, unwieldy submissions that we have all had in the past. The intention is to create parity with other subjects across the Level 1 suite, and students who have been unable to develop a full portfolio or a finished outcome but have participated in teaching and learning should be able to access the assessment. Students will have access to all of their class time developed portfolio in the assessment event. And I do understand any apprehension you may have, as this form of assessment is new to many of us. However, it should be noted that these assessments will be piloted, reviewed and revised based on user feedback.
Yeah. Cool. I think the common assessment activity terminology might be new to some. A common assessment activity is essentially the same as a common assessment task, or a CAT, which might be more familiar to you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. I think we've reached the end of the PowerPoint part of the presentation. That felt like a bit of a speed run. There's a lot of information there conveyed in quite a short amount of time. I guess the good thing about being on video is that you can go back and review it a few more times. I think there's a couple of final messages, or one particular final message that I'd like to leave with you, and that's to engage with the process through your subject associations. Keep abreast of what's happening through the teacher-only days. Make sure that you're leaning into those and participating fully, but also really through those public consultation and feedback processes. We really do value your voice, and it really does help guide us in what it is that we're doing. So thanks for all your feedback so far, but please do continue to give us further feedback. Any final thoughts from you, Steph?
No, that's all good. I think we've gone through and covered a broad range of things in a short space of time. So hopefully that has been useful.
Yep. Thanks for bearing with us as we make use of the technology to do the thing that we're supposed to do in person. Wish you all the very best. Ka kite.
Ka kite.